Welcome to In Their Shoes by Shanakia. I'm Gaff.
And I'm Bex. We're here to help people connect through the power of shared storytelling.
In this podcast, we invite two people to tell a story about their life. Instead of reading their own story, they'll swap and they'll read each other's as if it was their own.
After both stories are finished, we will dive into the real questions to be asked, feelings that came up, and more moments that have maybe never been shared before.
Come with us as we experience walking in each other's shoes and immersing ourselves in each other's stories. This episode is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from around the globe. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover.
With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected so you can explore incredible movies, streaming anytime, anywhere.
Now streaming in the UK and Ireland, Perfect Days, a 2024 film by Wim Wenders, which connects with our theme of time. Hirayama lives a life of blissful contentment, spending his days balancing his job as a caretaker of Tokyo's public toilets with his passion for music, literature and photography. His structured routine is slowly interrupted by unexpected encounters that force him to reconnect with his past.
So I wanted to watch this film when I was home with my parents a couple of weeks ago. But so we watched the trailer together and I said, you know, it's the perfect depiction of what a perfect day is. It's shot beautifully. It shows the beauty in the mundane. And my parents were like, but where's the drama? Like, where's the chaos? Where's the murder? And I was like, it's the perfect day. It's just, that's what it is. And they didn't want to watch it. But I think it's an absolutely beautiful film. And as I said, gives you so much to appreciate in the everyday. And to look back on in your own life as to how you've had so many other perfect days. So I would recommend it as one of those like lovely Sunday chill movies, you know, that warms the heart.
Yeah, and actually that's what Shanakia is all about. We're all about celebrating the everyday story and the magic in the mundane. So seems like it's right up our alley, and hopefully the same alley as our listeners too.
And to stream the best of cinema, you can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/Shanakia.
That's mubi.com/SEANCHOICHE for a whole month of great cinema for free. Hey guys, how are you?
Good, all good.
Yeah, good.
Thank you so much for coming in. Very excited to have Lynn Ruane and Joe Caslin in with us for our episode of the Shanakia podcast. And the topic that you've chosen is time. And time is obviously a theme. We actually have never done Shanakia revolving around this theme, but it is a theme that's going to come up in the future at our events where we host stories revolving around this theme. And I'd love to know, why did you choose this theme specifically? What?
I had absolutely no input.
I thought you were going to say no time.
No time. So you sent the doc,
Yeah.
and it was like these lovely themes, and I was like going through me like nearly giddy with excitement because I was like, I can talk on so many of these. Sent it off to her and said, "What do you want to do? Time." I was like, yeah.
So you were the driving force, Lynn.
Yeah, well, I did ask you to pick a few, and time was one of the three that you picked.
Okay, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
So I am lying.
You stand corrected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. That's right.
And I did want to do time.
And then you didn't.
And I didn't because I realised that I need to go and do a master's. Then I listened to a whole book on redoing the philosophy of time. Like 3 hours, I listened to a book before I even start writing, right? That's how mad I go into it, right? Because time is a really interesting thing to think about. So I couldn't help it. So it probably wasn't the right one to pick if you just wanted to have something more concrete. But my brain doesn't work like that. But I think time is so interesting because for me, why I wanted to pick it was, I think as well, I had spent 9 months we've just finished up the assisted dying committee in the Parliament in Ireland. So I've been thinking about time a lot in different ways and what is within time and when is the right time and, you know, does time even exist in the grand universal scheme of things? Do you know what I mean? So when you're thinking about life and death for 9 months, I think probably that was very on the fore of my mind when the topics came in. So I think I must have been looking for a way to, again, process the process that I just finished. So then I forced it on them.
And then how we approached it was like perfect. Like it's how we, like I went down the route as in trying to evoke real instances, like personal stories, and you went the philosophical, existential. Yeah. But that's how you go at things. Like you like to see the entire field and get a view of it before then you speak.
But I think I'm also searching. Like, so sometimes when I pull up things like that, it's because, oh God, I can carve out the space now to think about this. Right? So I'm searching for something. So like whether the idea of understanding your existence, the world, and I've been doing that since I'm a kid. So when I see a time written on a thing, I'm like, oh, here's a great opportunity for me to actually explore again more in more detail some things that arise in you when you think of topics like that.
Joe Caslin is an Irish street artist, academic and activist, best known for his beautifully rendered pencil drawings, which manifest as towering pieces of street art. His highly accessible work engages directly with the social issues of modern Ireland. On an unavoidable scale, Caslin confronts the subjects of suicide, drug addiction, economic marginalisation, marriage equality, stigma and mental health, direct provision, institutional power, consent, and most recently the legacy of the Good Friday Agreement on young people living in Northern Ireland, the ceasefire babies, which I'm one of. The monochrome drawings Caslin creates live with us and against many of us for some time before washing away. They hold up a mirror to the kind of society that we are, whilst asking us individually what kind of society we want to be a part of. Do you want to talk a bit, Joe, about your work and how you got into it? And yeah, I mean, now you're living in Belfast. Obviously, that's probably, I'm assuming, why you sort of got into that project that you're in at the minute.
Yeah, the work that I'm doing at the minute, it's a project around conflict and the legacy of conflict. And it's working with the Imperial War Museum based here in London, and then the Nerve Centre, which works with young people right across Northern Ireland and brings them together and just gives them a voice in a place where young voices are either not heard or diminished. So yeah, it's a project. It's turned out that the 6 women that's on it, we did an open call, and the 6 women that's involved, and it's turned out to be the best crack. Like, it's 6 months of just shutting my mouth and listening, and where I need to step in and help, give credence to that voice that that they have. So we're after getting sign off on a beautiful site just outside Derry called Downhill House and Mussenden Temple. It's stunning. So the National Trust are the owners or the caretakers of the site. So we're going to take it over for 2 weeks at the end of May. So yeah, I can't wait.
Lynn Ruane is an independent Irish politician who has served as senator and deputy leader of the civil engagement group in Shannon since 2016. Lynn is from Tala, an historically underserved community in Dublin. A long-time community and drugs worker, Lynn now champions the causes most close to her heart and community in Ireland's Parliament. An ardent legislator, Lynn tables progressive bills which respond to the lived experiences of those on the margins of society. To date, that has included pursuing harm reduction in drug policy, meaningful rehabilitation in criminal justice, a fairer child maintenance system for lone parents, and the cessation of the misuse of non-disclosure agreements. Lynn also regularly seeks to amend government legislation to ensure it reflects the principles of human rights, social justice, equality, inclusion, and the empowerment of the marginalised. In addition to legislative work, Lynn is a member of 3 parliamentary committees: Justice, Assisted Dying, Children Equality, Disability Integration and Youth. Outside of her work in the Oireachtas, Lynn is a mother of 2 daughters, a published author, writer and screenwriter, a frequent contributor in print and online media, the creator and host of the award-winning podcast Conversations of the Margins, and most recently the co-presenter of the RTE documentary Lady Gregory, Ireland's first social influencer, with the esteemed Miriam Margolyes. Lynn, well, obviously most recently as well, Dublin Film Festival was on, and your film was in the film festival, am I right in
Yes.
saying that? Yeah, can you tell me a little bit more
So
about
that was the short. It's had to be nominated for a NIFTA as well. So
Class.
produced by Claire Bourne and directed by Grace Dias. So when I wrote that, I had already written the feature film at the time, but then Claire Bourne and Alfonso were putting in for focus shorts, and I always said that based on writing my autobiography, there was loads of themes that run through my autobiography that I think are stories that need to be told. You know, working class people telling working class stories. So the short that was in the Dublin Film Festival, it also won the London Irish Film Festival recently, and has had other recognition as well, which is great because everything I write and everything I write into the future, I'll only write it if there's working class actors playing working class roles. And it's not that other people can't play any roles. That's not an argument that I'm having. It's about creating space for very talented people to enter into a space that they ordinarily find difficult to be seen. So Jordan, my daughter, who's an actor, she's the lead in it. So she plays a young mother struggling. It's called Waiting Day. So it's kind of capturing that day, waiting for social welfare to be paid the next day. And it tries to capture that snapshot of poverty, but also capture it with love and humour, which is the way people who are often on the margins survive. You know, there's huge compassion, there's huge love, and there's huge humour, and often stories are told in a very grim way. And that's not always obviously our experiences are, I suppose, avoidable from a societal level, but it doesn't mean that we experience them constantly in this grim way because we are so full of character in the way we kind of go about our day. So it tries to capture difficult themes while also showing kind of true grit and character and humour. So it's a short film based on that, and it just got an IFTA nomination.
Congratulations, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
Joe, you're working in the prisons now. What's your work in the prisons currently?
So I'm working in Oberstown. It's a detention centre for young children in Ireland. So it's the only kind of children's prison or detention centre. And it's, I don't know, it's as an outsider, you think that, you know, those spaces are, like Lynn spoke earlier, you know, there's humour and there's joy in places, in that place. And many of my experiences and many hours of my time in there, it's not, you know, it's not the perception. Your experiences in there is not what you think it is going to be. The young lads are, you know, great, talented, intelligent. Many of them are there because of the consequences of their environment. And it's a place, like, even before I started, or even I got the offer of the job to go in there, and it took a bit of kind of soul searching before I actually walked in the door, because I was trying to go, okay, well, do you fit in there? And I had come from a background of teaching for like 12 years at this point, and you know, to go into that space. And I went in and, well, I looked at myself, and I've always tried to teach through my art, and always tried to ask people to be empathetic or hopeful. So if I couldn't ask that of myself in there, so once I kind of figured out my story and why I wanted to go in there, it very much has framed my time there. Like, I see my time there as hopeful, and I see my time there as empathetic. And I've had like some really wonderful experiences over the last year with the young people that's in there.
Yeah.
We're feeling kind of inspired because me and Bex are going into a prison in 3 weeks' time here in London to run our first storytelling workshop within the prison services, and it's something we're looking to kind of build out, because there is so much story in these spaces, and as you said, you know, there's a lot of joy and a lot of humour in these spaces as well, but equally it's obviously a very sensitive space, and it's something that I think that I've definitely been doing a lot of kind of work on myself the past couple of weeks to prepare myself just for.
I learned a lesson real early on. I was in the place maybe 2 weeks, and one of the young lads, he's maybe 14 or 15, and he goes, "Joe, I've been judged already. You know, I don't need you to judge me again." And that just set my place. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't Tim telling me, you know, how to behave in his territory. No. But he was going, you know, I don't want you to come in here and to come in with your preconceived notions and just lay them on me. He was like setting out his stall. The society has judged me. I've gone through the rigors of the laws and the system that was, you know, put in place because I broke the law, and you know, I'm here, and I'm like, he wanted to face me as a person, but he was asking me to face him as an equal, which was pretty, you know, kind of a big thing for a kid.
Yeah. Well, it's supposed to be, I think, reformative rather than punishment, right? I mean,
And your punishment, your liberty is taken away. That's your punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yet people continue to be punished in many other ways.
Yeah.
Through unnecessary control of lots of different things. Like there's punishment is the sentence. You know, it's being away from your family. It's having your liberty restricted.
Yeah.
But the problem is, in most prison systems, that's not where the punishment ends.
Yeah.
And even when you've gotten out, the punishment continues, and how you're treated and judged and kept out of spaces, and never really, like, people like to say it's reformative or it's rehabilitation, and then you have to ask, well, what do you mean rehabilitation, right? Because rehabilitating what? Because the individual was a child that ended up, in most cases, when you look at the demographics of people in the prison system, it's the environment that needs rehabilitation. It's the policies that need rehabilitation. So this idea that individuals all the time need the rehabilitation, and then we take people out and we put them back into a society that already rejected them and moulded them and decided who they were. Do you know what I mean? So there's so many big conversations to be had about, you know, one of the pieces of work I'm doing at the minute is, so the lads call it like the factory on the Royal Canal, right, is where Mount Joy Prison is. And it's like, well, it's like a factory. We're just moved in, but like boxes moved around, and it's like, but what's the factory making? You know, and he's like, what are they making? Do you know what I mean? Like, and what are we made of? You know, so it's kind of like, we definitely need to ask questions of prison systems about their ideas of what they think they're actually rehabilitating, because most recidivism happens then in the community. So why is the community not being rehabilitated in terms of services and investments and housing and all of that type of stuff? It's constantly down to this individual blame game stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, it's difficult working in prisons when you have that, when you know that, do you know, when you're looking at people who in many cases have done things that obviously, and some of the men that I work with, like, I mean, they've taken lives, they've been involved in all sorts of things, and it's not to take away that accountability is needed in them situations, but it's like, how do you stop them situations in the first place? And no one wants to have that conversation. People always want to kind of say vilify forevermore the individual, say, that was involved with like violence or something, but nobody, and if you listen to politicians, they never discuss, well, what are the core drivers of violence? And one of the core drivers of violence is not having your economic needs met. So if we're talking about rehabilitation, we're like, well, why do so many young men, say especially, find it really hard to meet their economic needs? And also, why do they feel humiliated? Humiliation is one of the core drivers of violence too. So it's like, well, where does that humiliation come from too? Do you know what I mean? And I think having conversations like that, because we individualize on the person in prison about what they're going to do to change their lives, and they have all the aspirations, and they're smart and intelligent and resourceful and all those things, but then society doesn't meet that. Do you know what I mean? And that's just a big important conversation that we need to have. The theme for today is an interesting one for them.
Time.
Yeah, and how they even experience time. Like some of the lads in the prison will tell you what time of day it is from a sound that they hear in the corridor,
Wow.
from a footstep, from a certain key that jangles a certain way, from, you know, because there's not necessarily clocks everywhere, you know, so they're in a connection to the nowness of every experience that they're having, like, in terms, so that'd be a really interesting one for a
And
person.
the countdown. Like
Yeah,
how
well, I was
many,
going to say,
the countdown of when I get out of here, when I meet the
and
judge,
when you have a life sentence with no time on the end, so you're constantly waiting for someone else to tell you when that time may end, and you don't ever know. So you're always working towards something that is just unfolding in a way that you have to just move through and without any concept.
And the things you've missed, you know, missing your child growing up or your parent dying, or, you know, there's some big events that, you know, and not having that experience breaks people. And so sometimes it's, the burden is being added.
Talking of time,
Oh yeah. Nice segue.
I think it's time that we get into the stories. So we're going to start with Joe's story, which I'm going to ask Lynn to read.
The time I sat and drew your face for a week, a side profile with a powerful Roman nose. The time you climbed into the cherry picker and we stuck that face to the front of Trinity College. The time we ditched work and went dress shopping for one another. The time I gifted you a bracelet. And the time you tattooed it on your wrist when it broke. The 14 times you sent videos of your ma trying to escape her reclining chair. The countless times you've sent love on WhatsApp. The time I gave you a cowboy cactus and you had it for 2 stressful years before she grew. That time you attempted to send me a Bertie video but got too distracted looking at yourself on the camera. The time you threatened to tweet Carol Vorderman looking for a vowel. The time I watched you cry in the chamber, I felt that so deeply. The times you call me Joseph and I know we have entered serious territory and I need to pay attention. The times we speak and listen and dream. The times I've left your company and felt lighter. That time I arrived at your house, washed my jocks in your sink, hung them on the washing line for an hour and then left. The time you drove from Tallaght to Belfast just to give me a hug. Every single time I've been in your car and you've taken off your bra. The time you needed to get away and I was able to offer you a refuge. The times you tell me that people think you're scary and I know you're really as soft as cowshy. The time I found you to help save a friend and her family from deportation and you dropped everything to show up for us. The many, many times you've tried to find Roscommon on a map of Ireland. The countless times you've called me Josie. The time we tag teamed the Portaloo with nervous diarrhea at Body and Soul. The times you've let me down gently. The times you've picked me back up. The times we don't speak about. And this time here now. I don't know what time has in store for us, but I promise you this. Ears and shoulders, 2 of each, is all I can offer, but I always will. Sean Watmore.
Wow. That's a love story in itself. Thank you so much for reading that, and thank you so much, Joe, for preparing it. There's a lot there. There's a lot of different micro moments of complete unadulterated love that I definitely want to interrogate. Probably firstly asking, who's Carol Voderman? Sorry for my ignorance in this one.
What? You're so young.
Yeah.
You don't know who Carol Vorderman is?
Who the fuck's that?
Countdown.
Oh, is that what her name is? Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
but
not,
the
Another
older
girl.
one.
no, I haven't a clue.
She's really good politically as well, actually.
Really?
She's,
Mm-hmm.
Is she?
Yeah, like
That's
she
really
followed
bad.
she followed me on Twitter, I remember.
And then you
And
want
then-
to ask her for a vowel. That's why.
Is that why you
Yeah.
tweeted? Okay, now
She
it's
followed her.
making
She saw the Carol Vorderman tweeted her, and then she wanted to ask her for a vowel.
that now makes a little bit more sense, but I need
Well,
to do my research.
she was on the television like back into the 80s, and it was a woman of intelligence.
Yeah.
And like, you know, you went through a time where women were like, you know, on game shows holding up cards and
Yeah.
looking well and turning around, and like, what were they? Any furniture? She was an intelligent woman and has spoken out on lots of
Lots of things,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah,
She was a
ask her for
vanguard.
as many vowels as possible.
Absolutely.
Everyone
Moving
get
forward.
on and ask Carol for a vow.
I'll tweet her from the
I know
Shanachia
the
page
other-
now saying, hey, sorry, just found out who you were. Any vowels going? Yeah. We only had the 4 channels. I think that's my excuse. Was it on the 4 channels? It wasn't on the 4 channels. It was
Channel
ITV.
4.
Yeah, didn't have that. Yeah, didn't have that growing up. Sorry, it's like I should have asked this, but it's quite clear that this is about you, Lynn.
Yes.
How did it feel reading, you know, just like on a page, how Joe kind of summarizes or interprets or pays homage to your friendship?
I kind of was like, oh shit, I didn't write mine about Joe. No, but I think it came at a very good time for me because, like, I mean, I think I've spent the last year really assessing my identity. Like, I've always really been strong on who I am. I thought I was, and then sometimes that gets rocked a little bit, or you don't know where you belong or where you fit in. And I had this therapist once that always says to me, his name is Jimmy, and when I always say to him, I'm not sure where I fit in anymore, because I come from such a tribal kind of, you know, when you grow up on an estate, everyone's together, and I still have that, but I have to choose to dip into it, like, you know. But so I come from an identity that's collective, even though I'm like politically independent. my being is a collective thing. You know, I figure out who I am through collective experiences as well, and collective identities and all of that. So for me, for the past year, I've been really struggling with, like, don't know where I belong. Like, you know, like the most elite constituency in the country votes me into the Shannon, but a lot of my work is focused very on, you know, people who experience poverty. My day is spent in Leinster House around people who, of course, I respect and I get on with and I can politically engage with, but it's not me heart. You know what I mean? So when I read that, it was really good for me to read, because it's like when Jimmy says to me when I tell him I don't know where I belong, which is terrible, he always says, then you belong everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought of Jimmy's voice saying, see, you belong everywhere, you know, even in Roscommon with him in his 40 card. You know, so it's nice to know that even if I'm struggling with a collective sense of belonging, that I still have very special individual connections that are that see me.
For sure. And I also think it's quite a rock solid friendship when the sentiment and words of a friend can ladder up to what someone like a therapist who has more of an objective perspective of you say. It's a sign that you clearly really know each other and have a very core not only love and friendship but also understanding of one another as well. So that's really beautiful to hear. There are a couple of moments that, you know, Joe talks on in this story, that might bring up certain memories for you. One of which really struck a chord with me is, of course, the time that you displayed emotion in the Seanad, in the chamber. For those of you guys who don't know what the Seanad is, it's the Irish for the Senate in the Irish government. Did that bring anything back for you? Would you like to walk us through that moment?
I think that was the first of me crying for the past year.
Wow.
I started then and I haven't stopped, you know, and I think, like, I don't experience hardship in the way that I did growing up. I come from a community that has just experienced more than its fair share of anything that I should ever have to endure. And so my experiences are different, but I think the more I grow, and certain survival tactics that I've probably dropped somehow, I'm probably more sad now than I was 20 years ago. I'm not stoned either to cover it all up. But I also, like, I had terrible, I used to go into rages growing, like I had quite anger issues, but it was all just me trying, like, and when I started to strip all those things away, there was just absolute, like, a year of tears. You know, and I think that moment when I kind of broke down in the chamber is like, you go into politics, and obviously I'd worked in the addiction sector and developing addiction services, and I worked in the homeless sector. I don't like calling them sectors because it kind of legitimizes them as things that they just shouldn't even, but anyway. Spaces. Yeah, so but I really hoped that I could change something, not in a naive way, but just in a, like, I need to believe I can change something for people who experience the things that I've experienced and that are still experiencing them in really large numbers. And I think in the last year or two, I've been like, oh, once the next big thing comes, like, even when you think you have political ally on board and government parties on board, something comes that they move on to, and the thing that you care about that can change lives, whether it's drug decriminalisation, whether it's addressing poverty, nothing happens. Do you know what I mean? So when I start to kind of break down in that, I think I was losing hope. You know, I was becoming cynical that, God, like, and people just say to me, oh, you have to stay in there because you say things that need to be said, or our voices are heard. I don't want to only give the illusion that something is happening. So I kind of had this identity break where I'm like, am I part of the theatre now? So, like, there's this system and it's powerful and it's too powerful for someone like me to change. But because I'm in there, the political system thinks, oh yeah, but Lynn works on that stuff.
Seeing my mate get so frustrated and so upset over something that she's been trying to work to improve for so long. Like, it was like I was sat beside her. Yeah. So you got up to speak. A few words came out. You got angry. You stopped. I think you sat down. You stood up again. And I was there with you. Like, I felt it so deeply. And then as an outsider, like, I've never seen a politician cry, like, ever. I've never seen anyone in any chamber across the world cry or be emotional about something that meant obviously so much to you. And that was amazing, you know, to see that people care, because, you know, so much time we know politicians don't.
No.
And like, even earlier on this podcast, you called them them politicians. Like, I don't. Yeah, I was sad because it was my mate, but I was more sad and more hurt. Even now, speaking about it, I feel it here, because it's something that's so important to the two of us and so many other people, and that you kept trying to break that door down for so long. And who you were speaking to was just sitting. Like, I think he even was on his phone at the time when you were trying to speak. And I remember at the time it went across social media, and there was a big kind of uptick on it, because, you know, it was someone being honest in a place where you don't necessarily expect honesty.
Yeah.
It's such a male-dominated space that, you know, having an emotion is seen as a weakness.
Yeah.
And the minute you have an emotion, or God forbid, any woman is anyway, you know, kind of, rather than just this corporate entity that strolls around Leinster House, you know, the idea that if you move even slightly away from what the script is, like, social media just tears you down. Like, it's unbelievable the abuse any woman in power gets, or any woman that is in, you know, that uses her voice. They just get, like, stripped down. Like, this project that I'm working on in conflict in Northern Ireland, there was a fact that came through. It was like 75% of all MLAs, female MLAs in Northern Ireland, have had sexual abuse sent to them over social media. Like, it's, you know, we've spoken about even, you know, kind of what people have said online about you the minute you open your mouth. It's just a litany of stuff that comes.
Yeah, because that always comes from feeling threatened. And so the best way to be able to take away the threat is to threaten the other person. And so almost in a way that shows that you're actually making people wobble, you know, in a way. It's a hard thing to take.
I think one of the biggest things, though, for me in politics is not always only the gender piece, it's the class piece. So a lot of the stuff that have come my way, people still don't understand class. They don't understand. I can pick up a classist comment in the second it's said. Nobody else in a room will even bat an eyelid or cop that it's after being said. And I think we've really a long way to go to understand classism in politics.
Massively.
So the type of things that I would get called would be like junkie, scumbag, you know, all the stuff that you would hear said about, you know, vulnerable groups in society or working class community. So the type of kind of target or if I get exercised about something, it's like I'm aggressive, right? But that's my accent that they're like, and people think that I'm being sensitive about that, and I'm like, well, it's not, because the man beside me in the committee also just got exercised in his suit and in his more like professional toned accent, and got as exercised, if not more than me. But I get abuse as if I'm aggressive, you know. But it's the second that, like, that, you know, that flat Dublin accent comes out, like, you know, there's an extra layer on that, you know. And it's like, I push on through it, like, do you know what I mean? I get louder, like, I'm quite defiant, you know. I think I'm so glad I'm as defiant as I am. It doesn't mean that I don't kind of go, geez, I wish that wasn't happening, or, you know, but I get a bit more, like, I'm the type of person that if someone said, like, oh, do you see her? Wait, I see her, I'm going to, you know, give her a piece of my mind, and I'm like, where are they? You know, like, I walk towards danger. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm not sitting around in some unknown waiting on someone to, like, have it out with me. I'm going to walk to it. So if when people challenge me, or people berate me, or people kind of put me down, I push against that. You know what I mean? And but I think that the part that bothers me the most is more people reading it who are from communities like mine, feeling that it's also about them. Do you know what I mean? Because I might be talking about an issue of prison or drugs. So there's other people. It's all right for me not to be affected, because I'm an elected politician. I have a safe salary at the end of each month. I have a home over my head. So it's okay for me to kind of shrug some of those labels off. But those labels also apply to many other people that I'm advocating for. I think that's probably the hardest bit.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, like, you guys have obviously become friends within the past 10 years, and, you know, we're recording this podcast in London. You're both living in big cities, but Dublin and Belfast. You live in Amsterdam. A lot of people talk about living in big cities and the struggle to make friendships at a later stage in life. You know, how much lonelier adulthood is. The systems aren't really in place for you to foster real relationships as adults unless, you know, you work together or you find some sort of common ground. How do you guys feel in light of your own friendship? You know, do you think that it was easier to become friends because you knew exactly what it was that you were looking for in a friend, or do you think you guys just got lucky?
I think there wasn't an intention.
No.
I don't think the intention was there. I think it just happened.
Yeah.
It just was an organic friendship. You know,
Like, we both work with countless people. Like, we work with,
yeah.
you know, we're always doing something. There's always something ahead of us, or we're always in the middle of something. And it's not to negate any connection that you have with anyone in that specific time. But a few people manage to come out of that and you know, kind of move with you. And like 10 years, I didn't even know it was 10 years until today. But we've we've stayed consistent. Like, we'll always try and like check in. And I wanted to put in, like, friendships they take a bit of work, but some don't. And it's those, I said to Lynn on the train on the way in, that it's like all of the little pieces that's there. They're just tiny little instances of a connection or a bond. Now, there's other stuff that we can't speak on air. But all of those together amass into something special.
But for me, he's also not shocked by anything I ever say. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think I work in a space sometimes where even my humour,
Oh yeah.
is that, you know, so that working class, dark, gritty humour, you know. So sometimes I just, like, so I think it probably just happened as well, because I just was like, oh, that just, like, there's no, I don't feel any, like,
Reserve.
yeah.
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 Yeah, it's like, even when I was reading that, it was nice to reflect on it, because you realise that it is, like, it's special, and I don't want to let it go. And like we're always very honest with each other, and even in the last couple of sentences that's in the piece that was written, like, I don't know what's ahead. Like, I have no idea, but like, I do know what I can offer you, and it's, you know, kind of ears when you need me to listen, and a pair of shoulders to stand behind you when you know things are pushing you so far that you might fall. And that's, you know, that's kind of the best thing that you can give someone.
Definitely.
Was there anything you learned about Lynn as your friendship started to progress that made you love her more?
I think everything. Yeah, like, it's kind of like an accumulation. Like, it was very funny. Like, I remember I sent on the piece, and you thought it was about my partner.
I know. I meant to say that at the start. I was like, oh, is this a love ode?
And then
to
I
your
was
partner?
like,
You're like, Lynn.
and I said it to Lynn, and she's like, because every time I do get in the car, like, the bra's in the back seat immediately. So I was like, no, Lynn wouldn't float my boat. Sorry, love.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to come back to was you saying sort of you had this aggression when you were younger, and you just said it too. And I think I had that too, maybe coming from those circumstances where you always had to fight. But how, like, the older I've got, I've channeled that into this sort of like tenacity to try and keep things going. Do you feel that that's came through in like everything that you do? And then, you know, with your identity, I feel there's a point in your adult life when you've been doing that so long that maybe you're like, God, I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to, you know, like, I want to have a minute to be vulnerable or to cry or to experience this in a way that doesn't feel so, you know, like.
I think I've an interesting relationship with anger, in the sense that, being a mother so young as well to two young girls, it's
Sorry, Lynn, can you just say how young were you with your first?
15 when I had Jordan, and 21 going on 22 then when I had my second girl. So for me, my anger also impacted other people, do you know what I mean? Like, so it would bristle up off people, and so I think I would have a nicer relationship with that anger, that angry side of me, if I knew it didn't also impact people that I love and care about. So I have that side of things that I'm kind of going, Jesus, I could have been so much calmer and so much more easygoing. But I had undiagnosed ADHD, which I only learned last year. And so a lot of new kind of lenses on things are coming through for me now. But I also was quite angry about things. I did have an art to channel it into getting myself, like, you know, into working in the drug sector, into studying. So I was channeling that energetic push. And there's, you know, anger can be obviously really, really healthy. The problem is I think I had lots of unhealthy anger as well. So it's been able to differentiate between those two. One of them being, you know, unhealthy potential survival when you didn't need to be, like when you were misconceiving threat and stuff. You know, when you grow up with the perception of threat, like threat is present because you've experienced harsh things, but then sometimes you're just stuck in the threat of it, that it's only perception and you're still operating in that. So it's kind of took me years to kind of pull some of that away. But I still, like, I don't want to fight, but I'll fight. Do you know what I mean? And that's where I'm at now. Like, it's kind of like, if I can resolve something, if I can work really hard to make something happen, if I can find a policy that helps over there, if I can, you know, just take time out and, you know, regulate myself, great. But like, I mean, if something comes my way and it needs me to fight, I'm quite okay. I'll step into there. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll step into that space. It doesn't feel nice all the time, and I would prefer things to be much easier. But I think there's several different types of anger. So I think for me, it's just differentiating between each one and which one is good for me to engage in and which one is actually just unhelpful.
Yeah. Well, I love that Joe called that out as part of your character. Like, people think
Yeah.
that you're quite, you know, like this, like, aggressive person or scary, but actually you're so.
And I did. Like, my like, I remember when we first met, and I think maybe a couple of times after that, I was like, you let me in.
Yeah.
You're not like, it's not like you pick and choose who you allow in, but you have a small place, a small group that you keep close. And you know, like you spoke about fight as well. Fight is given to you by where you come from. You know, like fight is given to you by the environment that you grow into, because your voice isn't worth shit. So like sometimes the only powerful thing, the only thing that can make you visible is that anger, that energy. And I think the older you get, the more calm that comes with, because you get older. But then also, you know, you learn that you have other languages, other ways of speaking about what hurts. But if that's, you know, like you can't diminish someone by being angry if that's the only way that they can express a voice. And you know, kind of from the backgrounds, like your background from West Belfast is, you know, like, I don't need to speak to you about what that is. You know, kind of it's a known from all of our experiences.
Yeah. I think we could go on and on, to be honest. I could sit here for hours talking about this. But they're going to kick us out. So we should get into Lynn's story.
The demiurge brought into being the sun, the moon, and the 5 other stars for the begetting of time, Plato. I remember learning my dad was older than I thought he was, and that time existed in measurable units. Somehow our time had been altered, robbed, or is ending, believing time to be concrete measurements like when you were born or the length of time it would take you to run to the shop while your dad pretended to count. "You're taking time on me," I shouted and howled at my parents. I think of time differently now, and unlike those concrete measurements, time now alludes to me. Still, it also taught me much, especially later in life when Dad experienced dementia. It is more abstract and a way for humans to put structure on something beyond our understanding. In Plato's Timaeus, he suggests that time is celestial, a clockwork related to motion rather than an actual measurement, a becoming of sorts. I like to think of celestial time when I'm thinking of my dad. If time is motion and motion is change, then time is much more predictable than I first thought. And now I like to imagine that time is timeless and therefore the time I once lost with my dad wasn't lost at all. It was always and forever in motion. Even in his absence, the motion continues, and as I develop and change, our relationship develops and changes, and I get to know him more each day. Death hasn't ended our relationship. Our relationship just consisted of different properties before and after death. So now, when I think of time, I imagine it celestial, as something above my understanding and beautiful, rather than something ticking away on some morbid egg timer. Time is Da hiding a feather in a hole, in a tree or under a rock in Blessington Lakes, and bringing us back the following year to try and find it. Time is Da showing up at school to collect Jordan, even though I told him I would be there. Time is hiding under the stairs so my dad can come find me when he arrives home. Time is him holding a buttercup under the kid's chin or blowing a Ginny Joe into the air. Time is teaching Da Paolo Nutini while in the last stages of dementia. I turned the corner to see his face looking at me with a lack of familiarity. It was the first time he had forgotten me, and thankfully the last. I move slowly towards his bed, hoping his heart finds mine as I gradually reach his side. His eyes meet mine. I can't find my kids, he says. I know heartbreak is real because at that moment, all my thinking about the world, about life, about time, and about time we lost because of his age just fell away. All that mattered then was that he had forgotten me. If he forgot me, his love for me was gone. I had no concept at that moment that our love went untouched, our love timeless and formless and so otherworldly that his forgetting me could never negate his love for me, as love is a separate thing. I need to find my kids, he expressed in a frightening tone. So off we went. I put him in a wheelchair and left the hospital and searched the grounds for his children. It was a summer day, his favourite. I thought of home and sat on the bench out the back, letting the rays tan his sallow skin. But at this moment he saw no sun, busy looking for his kids, caught in some other loop of time. After some time I came around to him. I look at him, calling him John, not Da, and I ask him when he thinks he last saw them and where we could look next. I remember all the tension and fear that painted his face. The last hour disappeared. Its place was relief, love, and the present. His blue eyes, silver quiff, and a large smile glistened again in the summer sun. His hand outstretched, joy. He pulled me in tightly and quickly. I found you and have been looking for you everywhere. My heart mended in that beat of a second. I wanted to beg him not to leave me again, but in reality he never left me in the first place. At that moment I knew love would win over the changing of time, because they're all the same. Some time is love, and time is my Da, who knows me always. So from there on, if we entered a new time, we entered it together. Time is being 2009, but us dancing at a party in the 1960s. Time is him thinking he went fishing but never left his room, so we fished. Time is him never forgetting to say goodnight. Time is him singing Danny Boy and Spinning Around by Kylie Minogue. Time is him forgetting my face, so we found it together. Time is wondering why I don't dream of him. I love him more deeply every day anyway. Time is wondering if he knows I have changed. Time is the cherry blossom coming into bloom in the garden without him here to observe, yet it still blooms. Time is the hot sun hitting my face, and I know he felt the same pleasure on a warm day. Time is looking at my hands and wondering if they always look like his. Time is an endless motion of something that I cannot quite put my finger on, but no longer want to anyway. I am not losing time, chasing time, or even still angry with time. It is literally out of my hands. Time is Da insisting there is no point in arguing with me as I'm too righteous. Time is knowing that I learnt that from him. And it's Da singing his last song. Time is Da dying and my growing. Time is being too tall to see the caterpillars on the underside of the wall. Time is being too disheartened to keep fighting. Time is having no choice but to keep fighting. Time is sunrise and sundown. Time is leaving. The press is open and my ma saying I'm just like my dad. Time is that there wasn't a beginning. It is just a timeless motion, and my dad will exist somehow forever in that motion. Not dementia nor death can touch that. Time is the timeless motion of life. My and my dad's love. And time is the cactus that Joe gave me that refuses to grow. Time is none of these things, and time is also knowing that time is love, and that I will always know my dad and him me. Time is ours.
Beautiful. Yeah, that was
Got
gorgeous. And this is just so beautifully written, and I think that obviously this is a relationship that you have with your father, and I even say have because everything that you're saying kind of speaks to the fact that the relationship hasn't been ended by death. But I'm still, would love to know what emotions kind of surfaced listening to Joe read this out, and even sharing this with Joe and sharing it with the space. How do you feel?
Well, when Joe was reading, I was actually going, oh, now I know why me and Joe are friends. Because he's like me dad. Oh. But my dad was very gentle, right? And wise. But he had, what I realised is he introduced some really important concepts into my life without realising it. So we weren't like a political family, or we didn't discuss, I didn't think we were discussing big things. But kind of like Joe gently gives you information. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of just in his, it's just kind of there. Like, it's never like, he's never telling you something, he's always just saying something. And that's kind of like my dad. Like, my dad had a way to just say things that made you think about life, but he was never asking you to do it. Am I making sense on that?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's what I thought when Joe was reading. I was like, oh God, Joe and my dad have some nice kind of similar character traits. But yeah, I think for, like, my dad's dead a year before I met Joe. No, 2 years before I met Joe. So, we had a really lovely relationship, but it rocked during my teenage years because I didn't realise he was, I thought he was younger than he was, and that's where that whole concept came. I really, really did think they robbed me. Like, I had 15 years extra with my dad than you're telling me I now have. And then I rebelled against it. So I actually interrupted the positive time that we had together by being so fixated on the time they took from me that I decided to take more of it. Do you know? So when he kind of got diagnosed with Parkinson's and stuff like that, like, there was a few years in there in my teenage years where I was just really difficult. I was just so difficult. But when I read it, I'm like, he has taught me so much. Like, and I've used the analogy before about how my dad was as a sports person. So he was, the little things he passed on to you from the line, like, if you were aggressive with the ref or anything, like, I mean, you'd be pulled to the side. You don't talk to, like, he was always teaching you something. Do you know what I mean? And I think he continues to teach me things. And I think he continues to teach me things because I'm maturing and healing. So I'm starting to remember the things he taught me in a whole different way, which means that I get to engage with his concepts and him as a human in a different way. And he died in his late 70s. So I feel incredibly excited that I get to live to the age that he got to, which means that he'll continue for me to learn things to the same age that he was, because I get to match the maturity at those different times and the thinking at those different times. Do you know what I mean?
Completely.
So for me, it was lovely to write it, and it was lovely to obviously hear Joe read at that time, because I never kind of looked at Joe's way of teaching you things. And he said it earlier on about art as a way to teach, like, so the teaching is just happening around it. And I think my dad was potentially the same. So there was sport at the centre, with Joe, there's art at the centre. And then there's some very gentle lessons happening without you realising that they're happening. Yeah.
Can I ask, was there a specific reason why they had told you your dad was a different age to what he was?
I think he was just a little bit older than me ma.
Right, okay.
And I don't
yeah.
know whether it was just an assumption that they were the same. Like, do you know what I mean? It was just,
Yeah.
you know, I was about 8 when I realised he was just a little bit, he was just older, you know?
Yeah.
And it just came as a massive shock to me,
Completely, yeah.
you know, because I didn't realise, like, I know now, I understand now that I think about things in an unusual way sometimes. So my brother just went,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah, yeah.
grand, yeah. Where my world fell apart. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, you know, it's mad how we engage with things differently, like in the same household, you know. Yeah, so, but we had a lovely relationship, and, you know, we song and laughter, it was just always present, and dance, and, you know, and he never, ever, ever turned his back on me. And I'm telling you, I don't know how my parents didn't hate me. Like, I don't know how. I don't know how they just kept growing their love around me. The more difficult I got, it just grew around me, and it grew around me, you know. And I think,
I don't think you could shock your ma at this stage.
no, God love her.
No.
God love her.
While, you know, death is one thing, but then there are other illnesses such as dementia, which is the illness that you've spoken about today. You know, they still can cause someone to slip away in terms of how you knew them versus how they were or are in the situation. And, you know, you mentioned the kind of heartbreak of your dad forgetting where you were, let's say, or you. And your response was really resilient. Like, you helped him find you again. How did that feel? Because I can't imagine how that must have felt emotionally for you.
It was really, really hard. Like, I was still, obviously, like, I was in my 20s as well. Like, so I'm still, you know, you're still trying to understand your own life and world. And I didn't want him to forget me. It's like I could handle all the other stuff. Now, thankfully, my dad never developed Alzheimer's then. Like, it's kind of like there was a mix of dementia, and then we donated his brain afterwards, and he had locked-in syndrome, which we didn't know when he was alive. Some of them families and things can't be actually picked up until after death if you allow the brain to be analysed. And I really didn't want him to forget me, because I still felt I wasn't finished making it up to him, and I still had things I needed to say. So I never treated a single second again in a wasteful way, you know. I always told him that I loved him, told him what I was doing, what I was planning, you know. I'd lie in bed in his arms, and, you know, so I just wasn't ready for him to forget me, you know. And it was more about me, and sometimes these things are more about ourselves than about the other person, you know. They're about, what have I not gotten yet, you know, or what have I not said yet, or, you know. But from then on, when he would have kind of hallucination type stuff, more so than even, say, memory loss, I just went with it. I mean, I grew up on the foothills of the Dublin Mountains, so we grew up eating bags of mushrooms in October. So I just, like, you need to treat every hallucination that this man has like you're literally roaming the Dublin Mountains taking mushrooms.
Yeah.
So that's how I approach things.
Yeah, yeah.
And it made it really easier, because it meant I wasn't resisting. And I wasn't trying to convince somebody that they weren't feeling or seeing something that they weren't. So especially working in drug addiction services for so long, and I'd be working and helping people with drug-induced psychosis and stuff. And in that scenario, you would never go in overly challenging someone's... You frighten someone. Like, you have to learn how to move around that. So I just took some of that skill set into that relationship then. And we had some lovely, funny times. Like, you know, I tried to convince them that Leeds had... were being... had made... were being promoted back into the Premiership.
No.
Because I knew it was coming near the end, and I was like, guess what? Leeds are being promoted back into the Premiership. And he's like, I might have lost my mind, but I'm not fucking stupid.
Were you a Leeds fan, or was he?
No, he was.
He was. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. At least we didn't believe in it too
I'd be
much.
trying to now, and I could teach him songs right till the end. Like, I mean, I taught him Adele songs. I taught him Palantini songs, you know. So we found, if things felt really hard at the time, we'd usually just sing.
Wow.
And the singing regulated. And if he couldn't remember, or he was a bit confused, memory, like I said, didn't become a huge issue all the time. But if there was any agitation there in terms of like, because he did end up in a nursing home then and stuff, and song always brought him back to the space he needed to be.
Well, I like what you said about time being change. And like, even in change, even if it's incredible, it's still hard because you come out of that safety of what you know. But like, everything changes whether we like it or not. Like, even I'd say, you know, the way you experience things even changes. Like, just seeing Joe now reminding you of your dad, like, that's changed, like, maybe how much you value your friendship. Like, even when you're talking about friendship, I'm like, oh, me and Gaff met and it was so easy, and now we're here. Like, that idea of like great friendships, okay, you have to work for some, but like some really special ones you just make, and like it just flows so easy. And like, so just all that sort of sentiment of like time in that way and how things evolve, I think is really nice thing to just sit with. And I don't know if it answers your questions on time. Like, I love how you started this being like, I think about, you know, answers to death and life and all this. I'm like, have you got the answers? Because like, we would all love the answers, but I think searching for it and keep questioning it is the best thing.
Yeah, like I think it's being comfortable with change.
Yeah.
Like, I think time does come down. It is like, I think that the philosophical underpinnings of the idea of time is change, and that change is not only individually experienced, like, but it's the like what Plato says, it's celestial, so it's otherworldly, it's the universe, it's everything within the universe, and that we're just really trying to put a structure on something that actually just happens without us. Do you know? And
thankfully,
yeah, and it's kind of like, well, change, if you can get comfortable with change, I think that's a really good place to be. It doesn't mean you'll always know what's going on and you won't have to keep seeking answers out and trying to control it or understand it. You'll still probably engage with it that way. But I think people that are good with change will ultimately have a certain type of experience of life that allows them to move through each part of that experience in its fullest. And I think my dad did that, like, you know, like, my dad wasn't afraid of death at all, like, you know. And he's like, I used to be like, he used to say, and I was saying, oh, Dad, like, you know, I was trying to talk, and I'd say something about death, and he'd say, oh, Lynn, everyone kicks the bucket.
yeah. That's right.
Everyone kicks the bucket. Do you know? And I used to just go, he's so all right with whatever life unfolds and this real acceptance and stuff. So I think for me, the answer is to keep fully accepting that change is the most inevitable thing. It is the only thing. Change is the only thing.
Yeah.
Lynn Ruane and Joe Caslin, I'd like to thank you so much for coming in today to this episode. It's been an absolute whale of a time. But no, it's been such an honour to have you here and share your stories, but also share your friendship with us. I feel like we're just in one big warm hug, not to sound really cheesy and naff about it, but it's been really special to go on this journey with you guys today. And yeah, I think I'd just like to thank you from the bottom of Shanakea's heart for coming in and for giving us your time. Join us next time to walk in more people's shoes, hear stories around different themes, and have more great discussions. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and we look forward to you joining us next time to connect through the power of shared storytelling.